Morning everyone, I'm back with a different tutorial today and it's about how to make a Kawandi. This one is finished and is so marvellous that I'm actually going to make another one for someone for Christmas. I'm going to film how I'm doing that, so it'll be interspersed with some of the filming I did for this and some of the filming for the new one. So this is the one that I've already finished and I have a pile of fabric to start another. But I just thought I'd show you this a bit up close. It's very soft. The hand, and what you would call the hand, the feel of it, is extremely soft. It is thinner than traditional quilting. That's what makes it seem so lovely. And I was so intrigued by the construction, that's why I decided I had to do it. It's made from the outside inwards. You're not supposed to really be pinning things on, but I do pin things on. And I'm just going to pass on the techniques that I've gleaned from actually doing the first one. This is quite big. When I was looking up tutorials online, people were doing quite small ones, you know, just like a couple of feet square. And from my personal point of view, it just seemed a bit of a waste of time. If I'm going to make a quilt, I want it to be at least a lap quilt, which is the size that this is. I also used double gauze on the back because I had it, and that has worked very well. So I would definitely recommend a softish fabric to be stitching through. And that brings me to the other point as to what to use for the batting. So on this one, I used 2 cotton scarves that I got from the thrift shop. And the reason I did that was because when I was doing my research, I found out that the Siddi women who, this is their traditional craft, would use old cotton saris for the middles. And they would layer up the old clothes, but it was mainly cotton saris. And I felt that the nearest I could get to that was these thrifted scarves. And so I layered them up. It seemed as if it was going to be too thin, but actually it isn't, and it's so gorgeous to stitch through. So I'm going to put this to one side and I'm going to show you what's going on with the next one. I've got this piece of yellow, which is an old bed throw that I got from the charity shop a few years ago. I've cut out a square, and the square size has been determined by the size of this scarf. It will cost me £1 from the thrift shop, and it's just nice and soft, and I've just folded it in half, and then that size by the width is the size of my quilt. I also had a grey scarf. The thread that I'm using, I've got this cotton abroader in yellow, and I think I'm going to start with the cotton abroader, and when it runs out I'll go on to whichever other one that I feel. This is my starting square laid out. It's actually about 39 inches square, or just over a metre, and all I've done is I've got the purpley scarf folded in half, and I've cut the grey scarf in half and put it on top. The first row is done without the batting entirely. I'll show you how my blue quilt was, and then I'm going to go straight into putting the first row on. All I've done is pin my first scraps on. It's just a big square. It's about 154 centimetres wide by 132. So I'm about ready to start. I have a sashiko needle threaded with quite a long length of my cotton abroader, and I have my first patch that I'm going to put on. And it actually comes to my very first tip or technique. Do not be mean with the seam allowance that you're going to fold over. Make sure that your backing is under by about 3/4 of an inch to an inch. Make sure that your patches are a good ½ an inch turned under, and you don't have to be pressing them with an iron. You can just finger press them. You need your first patch folded under on 2 sides so that it will line up with the corner, and then it absolutely goes edge to edge with no overlap anywhere. I suppose you could do, but I was trying when I did my first one to be mindful that this is the heritage of the Siddi women, and I was trying to do as authentic a trial of my own quilt that I could. I'll just go up a little bit in for a reason I'll tell you in a minute. I'm going to leave the absolute corner open, and I'm going to make sure that that is a nice straight line. That is a nice straight line, and I am just going to stitch it with a running stitch. Now I felt that when I was first doing it, I was doing a proper, what I'd call a running stitch. But the more I learnt about it and the more I did, I fell into a little stitch on the front, like that, and a bigger stitch on the back. And that is traditional, because the back should have the big long stitches on, and the front should only have small stitches on. You are going along absolutely right at the edge. And I fell into definitely into a certain length of stitch, which I kept to all the time once I'd got into it. My first rows are definitely more of an even running stitch each side, but the later ones are definitely done like this, and this is the most traditional, is the small stitch on the front. That's probably about a 1/4 inch, and maybe a half inch on the back. And you end up that you can load your needle and go across. And because you haven't got traditional batting in, it isn't a problem to pull your needle through. And so in this way, I'm going to go right round the outside. This is what intrigued me about the quilt in the first place, is that it's so different from what I would say the Western tradition of patchwork is. It isn't really a patchwork quilt at all. It's a plique. So I'm nearly ready to put another patch on, and definitely you see some traditional quilts that are very designed, but because I was doing my very first one, I didn't want to put that extra pressure on myself, and I just picked the patches up as I came to them, and that's what I'm going to do with this one too. So the idea of the next patch is, obviously I need the top edge folded under. I'm going to do it a good 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch. But I now have to decide, is this one going to be on top of that one or underneath? If it's going to be underneath, I need to turn that edge under. And again, be generous. Don't be too mean with it. I definitely was too mean with the turn under originally. And if that one's going to be on top, I have to turn that one in. So always you're just turning under as you go and making sure that your stitch will hold the fold down whichever way it's going. I'm going to turn that under. I'm going to put this one on top. So I'm going to turn that under by a decent amount and make sure this next one is right the way underneath. So don't stitch right to the end of one of your patches. You need to have enough that the next one goes underneath. I could put a pin in just to hold that together for myself and put one there. I used very few pins actually. Once you get going, you find that you just don't need them. And so now that I've got those two in, I'm going to make sure that my folds are nice, that the edge is level with the top again. And because I'm coming to a fold, I'm going to do just a short stitch here because I need that fold to be caught down. And in the end, I'm not bothered about what's going on here. I'm only concerned with this very top edge. And so I'm going to go back in here and carry on with my small stitch on the front, big stitch on the back. It does pull in, and that's part of the nice look of it in the end. But if you start to pull too tight, you'll end up with a great big wrinkled mess. So you can see I've got my first, it's a bit wobbly there where I've gone over. It won't matter in the end. So before I get any further, I'm actually going to look for the next patch. It's something you can just put on your knee on a night time and stitch away at it. Before you know, you've done a whole row or a whole go round. So I'm just finger pressing that edge in. I'm going to put this one on top, I think. I'm going to hold that in and carry on stitching. I definitely feel that the very first row round is the most difficult, because you do have all of these patches and they're only held down by one row of running stitch, and they're all flapping around and there seems to be no structure. But you just need to bear with it, because all of a sudden things start to come together and it gets easier and easier. So I'm going to carry along there. I'm going to make sure that is carrying on being nice and straight. Got a good straight length to go. And remember, there's no batting at the moment, so there's only 4 layers of fabric here at the minute. There's the folded edge of both of them, the back and the front. It does take a lot of thread. You could definitely use stranded cotton, but I think you'd have to use at least 3 or 4 strands, because you sort of need a thickish strand of thread. You couldn't do it with just 2, I don't think. So on this piece here, because I'm near that fold and I want to make sure that it's held down, I'm not going to come across it. I'm going to actually go down through the fold there so that I know that that's not going to come apart. And just take that stitch there, and it really holds it together. So in this way, I'm going to go right the way to the corner. I need to put these little squares in. So they're just a couple of inches square, folded diagonally twice, and they're added into the corner on the first round. So I was under the impression they were added last, and which is what I did with the blue quilt, but they're not. They're traditionally added first. They're called Phula, Phula, and it's believed that the quilt's naked if they're not on. And so on this one, I'm going to do it properly and add them right at the beginning on the first round like they're supposed to be. So I'm just going to put them in between the backing and the front, just by the corner. And they're supposed to be little flowers. So I am just going to start and stitch through all of them. And I'll finish this thread off by stitching this on. It's this whole style of quilt, it takes a bit getting used to. Traditional quilting's all about the accuracy and keeping your edges perfectly marked up. It took me a little while to get into the hang of it, because you do want them all to be beautifully put on, but everything's a different shape and things are just not done in the same way. And so I think you'll find it a wonderful process if you give it a try. And you can just hide your knots inside the whole thing. So I just was hiding my knots up there. That edge is there now, and I can come straight up there and carry on with my running stitch. Quarter stitch on the front, quarter inch stitch on the front and a half-inch stitch at the back. Fold that all down, fold that edge in. Again, I'm being generous with the fold, which was the thing I've learned from doing it myself. The lady that seems to have popularised this style of quilt the most was a lady called Margaret Fabrizio. There are some amazing videos online about her Siddi style quilts, and I learnt a lot from them, but the videos can be quite intense. But I will leave a link to them, because she actually went to see the women working on their quilts, and so she's the one that sort of was the authority about how to do them, what they were made from, how they did the designs. And so there is a lot to learn from those videos. A remarkable lady, I would say. It was from her that I found out that the fuller should be attached on the first round and not at the end like I've seen everybody else doing. And in the end she made, I don't know how many trips to watch the women and learn from them and design quilts with them. You can see I keep pulling my quilt just to make sure I'm not gathering up. There's definitely a rhythm that you get into, and that's very meditative and very, I don't know, it's just a nice rhythm that you get into it that I don't think I've ever got into with any other quilt that I've made. And I think it's all about the process. Almost back to the beginning, and so just before I close the last part up, I'm just going to add the last of my little fuller flowers in. So I've just put this on my dining table just so I can show you what the next stage is. Outer edge is now totally sewn on, and I feel that for me this was the stage where it was at the most awkward, because you pick it up and these whole pieces just flop apart and there's nothing holding it together. You could definitely pin it, but I found that actually I didn't need to, but it took a bit of getting used to it. This is now the stage as well where you put the batting in. So what I have to do is get the scarf folded in half, because that's the size of my quilt. And just lift your patches back. On the corner where you've gone round, you need to just tuck it under, like that. Lift your patches back and put them back down on top. And you do this over the whole of your quilt base. Lift the patches up, scarf in, whatever batting you're using. But I would really recommend trying this technique with the cotton scarves, because the finished quilt is so beautifully soft, and the main thing is it's very easy to stitch through. And I feel that when I've looked at what other people have been doing and putting batting in, it's just not, I think that's making it more difficult to actually sew the quilt. And this will be a more authentic way of doing it anyway. I'm actually going to layer the grey one in as well. And I think this was the bit that I did feel I needed to use the pins, because as soon as I picked it up onto my knee, this inner bit was all over the place. And once you've got it all in, you're ready for the second row. I'll actually stay in here for the moment. Nice and flat, no wrinkles. And I'm going to start the second row. Now, this is another thing that I've seen on other people were doing. They say it spirals in. Well, it's not supposed to spiral in. That each round or each square is one thing in its own right that gets finished off, and then you start with another square going all the way around. So it's not supposed to be a spiral. Of course, if you find that easiest and that's the way you want to do it, then it doesn't really matter. I'm just trying to explain what the traditional method of doing it is. And you'll find that unless you've used a very narrow patch, you'll be able to get another round in without doing anything to the patches that you've already got on. You just have to make sure that as you come up to the edges you've folded in, that you keep it folded in nice and flat. Traditionally they used the finger or their thumb, and that's the distance apart that you would be quilting. So your thumb goes in and you quilt along, or you stitch along, like that. Now I found this quite difficult to do at first, and so I sort of started off with my thumb and then thought I could just eyeball it. Well, sometimes I managed and sometimes I didn't, and it was another thing that definitely got easier the more I did it. So I would say that if you don't have perfectly straight lines at the beginning, just take it as your practice, and you will end up getting better, because it's definitely easier to keep the line on different fabrics is easier, and with practice you just get better at keeping the line. And this time, as I come up to the two patches that are going together, I'm just going to make sure that I hold that fold in, and that as I come up to it, I'm going to make sure that at least one of my stitches comes through the fold so that it can be caught down. And every so often I did put my thumb in to try and keep it, but some rows did get very narrow and some rows did go quite wide, and sometimes it was because I had to narrow it down for the patch, and sometimes I just didn't realise I was going narrower or wider. And I think that is just experience or lack of experience in doing this style of work. When I come up to needing to finish off, I am just doing like 3 back stitches in a row, just like you would if you were finishing off anything else. And see how near the edge the very first row is. It's within about 1/8 of an inch of the edge. I found the corners sometimes difficult to deal with, and I feel that having a big piece of fabric on the corner is worse than a little bit. So I think on this quilt I'm going to really try and have smaller pieces at the corner. Got the fuller already in, so I don't need to do anything with them. I'll show you that second row there. As you can see, it sort of takes a bit of getting used to having it all just hanging there. So here's my second row going through, and they're all looking perfectly fine. There's the back with the nice stitches. So I'm going to turn the corner. So here I'm going to show you this piece because there's the corner. I've sewn down there, and so this piece is going to come over both of them. So I'm going to make sure my corners is laid out nicely as I can. Fold that in. It's actually going to be going over this piece as well. And so on my next round, I'll have to put a patch in here and come across that. But at the moment, as long as I make sure that's fine like that, I can continue down this side. I'm going to come up near that fold. Make sure you're not pulling tight at the corners at all. You need to really make sure that that's loose. You want to make sure that that fold is well sewn. And then there's nothing else to let you know about really until there's a new patch to come on. So you can carry on doing your rows, and if you've used big patches, you might get a few rows on before you need to put a new patch. I'm back in my workroom because I've got a bit better light in here. I'm on my 3rd go round now, so I really need to add a patch here now. Going to just pick up the next scrap, and I'm going to turn that one under so that I'm going to be stitching along the fold on the same, so my stitching line is going to be the same width apart, but I'm going to bring that one down over the top. So I'm just going to tuck it under like that. And I could pin it or not, but I actually need to fold that edge under as well. And once you've started putting your extra patches in, it really is up to you whether you put them on top, underneath, you put a big one in or a little one in. It's all just part of the wonderful process that is making a Kawandi. Which brings me to another thing actually. I see people saying Kawandi quilt, and really it is either a Siddi style quilt, because it's the Siddi women who make them, or a Kawandi, because Kawandi actually means quilt. So by saying Kawandi quilt, you're just saying quilt quilt. And I say Siddi style because I am inspired by their beautiful needlework, and I really wanted to have a go at making a representation of their amazing quilts. Make sure I come up onto that fold because I need that fold to be really secure, and I'm going to carry on and just continue again. And you can see how easy my needle's going through there, and there's currently, well, there's two because that's folded, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, there's 7 layers of fabric here at the moment, and I'm still managing to stitch through without any problem at all. I definitely found the corners tricky on my first one, and I'm being ultra careful now. So we've got the little corner patch there, that one's gone up and over it, this one's coming over both like that. I need another one to come onto there, but I need to be able to stitch up this red one really to make sure that it stays and it's not flapping about at all. So I'm going to put just a small one over here. I could put a pin in, but I think I'm getting used to doing it without a pin. I'm just going to pick that up and hold it, stitch along this piece. Just going to put it down and check that I've got it all perfectly how I would like it to be, which I think I have, and then carry on to the corner and then turn the corner onto this piece. And now I've got a bit of a run until I get to that narrow bit. I hope that you're really finding something useful from all this, because I'm definitely not an experienced Kawandi maker. This is only my second one, but I feel that I've got something to add because I'm doing all with thrifted fabrics, and the fact of not using a traditional batting in the middle. I feel as if this is what a real Kawandi will feel like. Obviously I don't know for sure, but when I look at the ones that I see the genuine people doing, then this is the sort of thing that I think that they get. And I definitely encourage you, if you're going to try one, especially for the first time, I would encourage you to go bigger than you think, because by doing a really little one, you're not really getting the whole effect of the way that the patches go together, the way that the stitching can alter, and you won't get a feel of the softness and just how beautiful it actually is. And so my first one was quite big. It's a real proper lap quilt size. This is just 1 metre square, but I think that's a good size to do for a first one, because it's going to give you the scope to put some quite big patches on and also use some little ones up as well. And it's just about the right size that these type of scarves can either get folded in half or cut up into it. It's just a nice size, and it's still big enough to either go on a table for a table centre or on your lap as a little quilt, and you're getting something really useful out of it. So I hope if you have found it useful, then you give me a like or a subscribe if you think that it's been useful for you. I hope so, as I try my best to be as clear as I can in my explanations, because not everybody, you can't assume that everybody knows everything. I definitely don't know everything, and this is only my second Kawandi, but I've so enjoyed it. I just want to encourage everybody to enjoy having a go. I might not be able to show you this one as it gets finished, because I think this is going to be someone's present. And so I'll definitely be cutting back to my original one to show you the finish of that. And it's sort of about this row, the third or fourth row, when you really start to feel you're getting a quilt, as opposed to just a pile of scraps that you're sewing together. It definitely doesn't feel like a quilt on that first round. But you get to about now where you've started to add on another couple of patches, and you've got a substantial edge that you can actually feel, and that's when you start to realise, oh yes, I'm getting a quilt. Yes, and it's lovely and it's really soft. Just have a go. And I think I'll put my blue one in now to show you how it all ends up. This part here, where that blue is, that's my last piece that I have to fill in, because that's the only bit open, and I've worked right the way from the outside to the inside. It's been a lovely thing to do. As you can see, it doesn't even look anything like a traditional patchwork, and sometimes my stitches are quite even, but in the main part I actually think it's come out fine, and it's been such a pleasure to be stitching on. We can hear in the background is my fire's on, because it's freezing here today, and so it's crackling away while I've got the quilt on the floor so I can get it out. Well, my quilt got finished and I'm over the moon with it. It's wrinkled up in all the nice places and it feels really soft and lovely. The back of it looks really nice with the stitching, even though some places it's quite wide and other places it's quite narrow. And all in all, it's lovely. I hope you really enjoyed that and got something from it. As I said in the video, it's not that I'm an expert or anything like that, but I really enjoyed the process, and I've got this one. I've done more on this already, but I can't show you it because it will be going to somebody for Christmas. It won't take me very long either to get it finished, because once you start, the running stitch just eats the inches up and you get round, and of course you're starting with the very outside round, which is the longest, and so every single round you do you're getting smaller and smaller until it doesn't seem to take you very long to do quite a few rounds of stitches. Thank you very much for watching, and I really do hope that was helpful for you. I'll see you next time. I hope you've liked, subscribed, oh I don't know, watched another video, anything. Thank you very much everyone.